Well, welcome to Watercolor 42, Studio 42, and today I'm going to do something a little different than I normally do. I started off drawing my sketch here with a marker so that it shows up a little bit more. And I'm doing this as sort of like almost like you would a stained glass window type thing, in commemoration to the Mayflower, Plymouth. So kind of hidden in here is 1420 and 2020, and that adds up to 400 years since the Pilgrims came over. So down there in Plymouth, Mass, they're probably having quite a celebration around Thanksgiving this year. And of course, the unfortunate thing, they've had to cut back a little bit, keeping back the number of people and all that. But it should be interesting. We probably wouldn't be down there around too close to Thanksgiving, but to visit either before or maybe afterwards. I've been down there quite a few times over the years. And of course, there's a few other things to take in. They have the Plymouth Plantation, and that's very interesting. It's interesting, too, for children to see how the folks lived during that period of time and whatnot. But anyways, so I'm going to start off today. And I can go over, if I use a marker a lot of times, what I'll do after the paint dries a little bit, I might go over and make some of the lines, the contours around the objects a little bit more noticeable. So we'll see what we can do. Usually I try to do the background first, and then I'll go into the finished part. Now this is going to be, like I said, just a commemorative thing if you were going to do like a little plaque or something. 14, 20, 2000, 20, and 400 years, quite a while ago that the Pilgrims came over. So I'm going to start off today. I'm just going to do a little bit of the background first, and probably save my blues for the flowers. So the background can be something like some autumn colors. You're always safe to start off with some of your lighter colors and decide which areas you want to fill in, paint these different shapes in. I'm starting off with yellow, and I'll be jumping around a little bit, painting kind of a distribution of the color. Okay? You don't have to be too fussy about staying in the line, because you can always doctor that up a little bit. After it dries, you can go over it with a marker. The only problem with using a marker, you can't use it while the paper's wet, the paint hasn't dried, so you have to kind of hold off if you're going to do any more work with the marker until the very end. Okay, now, distribution of the color. You want to put the color in the same color, probably repeat it maybe at least 3 to 5 times, okay? So right now, if I fill this shape up in here, I've got that color in there 3 times, that particular color. And if I wanted to go 5, that would be easy. There's 4, a little bit out here. Here's your 4, just fill that in a little bit. And then we'll come over here. Let's see, I got 4. And, I'm a little hung up about uneven numbers, so I always like to do something like that's an uneven number. Why don't I just fill in a little bit right up around this area here. Let's fill that in. around the 14, 20. 1420. Of course, the intention of the pilgrim was to end up a little further south than they did, but I guess there was something about the currents and things that kind of pushed them a little further north. They were probably, they wanted to head a little bit further south down the coast, maybe, or say around Virginia or the Carolinas in that area. But anyways, they ended up in Plymouth. And I guess that's okay with us because they've contributed a lot to the history of the area. So there's 5 shades of some yellow there. And just clean my brush off a little bit. And I'm going to go to a little bit more towards some orange in there. I kind of want to get it sort of a autumn background this particular time of year. That's another thing too. Their intentions were to sail across the Atlantic and arrive here in warmer weather, but it took them, I don't know, quite a few days to get across, 50 or 60 days or so, if not more. And so by the time they got over here, it was almost, fall. So it was pretty close to being winter, so they had to build some shelter in a hurry. And I guess it was kind of rough on some of the folks because some of them didn't survive the winter as well. Of course, they may have taken sick on the ship coming over too. I say a ship, hardly a ship of sort, but on the boat. And and then when the Mayflower sailed back to wherever it was going to go, England or whatever, it only took them a couple of weeks. Like it was an easy trip back. Isn't that always the case? When you want the weather to be good, it kind of acts up. So I'm putting some of this color in. I'm going to be repeating it in places. This little color here is a little bit brighter red than when I started. Now with watercolor, if you want a color to be lighter, you don't put white paint in there. You just have to thin the color down with water. Add more water and just thin it out that way. So now if I get a brighter color there, I got to find another place where I could use that color. Let's put it up in here somewhere, right next to the number 1 and 4. Whoops. I'll get that a little bit darker. Here we go. Fill that in a bit. Okay. So there's 2 places. Let's put a little bit more of that over there. It's kind of touching there, too close to being towards the other color. So let's say if you want pink a lot of times, all you do is just take and thin red down, and it makes the red light like pink. Yeah, here we go. And I started up here. Let's finish this off in here. Now, of course, the people that used to design, they don't get into that too much now because it's so expensive, but designing all these beautiful windows, stained glass windows. And They used to do a lot more of that in public buildings, churches, etc. But it's so expensive now that you really can't afford that to do too much with stained glass. But there's still a lot of beautiful pieces of architecture around it that are stained glass. Let's see, I got 1, 2, 3 with that color. Okay, I'm going to make that a little bit darker. Almost look like the same color pink over here. So I want to make that a little bit darker in here. There we go. I don't know if that's getting it that much darker or not. Yeah. Well, somewhat. Okay. The beauty of watercolor, it does dry out. And of course, if you want to give any area or another coat of paint, you can always paint over that same area again if you need it to make it more of a contrast. So there's a little shape in there. I think I'm going to drop some of that red into that spot, right around here. Right into the corner there. Pull that out. There we go. Sometimes I can lock these shapes in too and outline them a little bit more. It's almost all of one shape now. But you can always go over that, touch it up. Okay. A couple of little specks in there I want to fill in there. Now, I think I got 1, 2, about 3 or 4 areas. I'm going to fill this one in a little bit more too. Right, the shape right up in here. Now, a lot of times you take a pointed brush, you can go up into that corner, up into that little wedge, and just pull the brush back out. And a lot of times what I do is just paint the outline, and then quickly fill in the middle. Just blend all of that paint around so that you don't end up with too many areas that dry before something else. Some areas you don't want to leave any lines in it, so you just kind of mix the paint around on that particular area that you want to fill in. This is starting to look too much similar color, but we can always take care of that. I can take some of the green. I don't want to get too much into right now, too much of the green and red, because we'll have plenty of that come December with the green and red colors of Christmas time. But let's do a little bit more down here. Now, I can take my yellow and thin that out quite a bit too, and make a lighter shade of yellow. I like brighter colors a lot of times. Sometimes when they design stamps and things, they use brighter colors. And then sometimes some of the colors are sort of dull. And so you're safe, I guess, to buy stamps with the American flag, because they're usually red, white, and blue, of course. And you got those colors in there. Sometimes some of the colors do get a little bit kind of drab. We'll fill this in. And do a little bit up into here. If you're doing sometimes the effect of stained glass windows, you'll get sometimes, if you look at the glass close enough, it has blends of other colors that they mix into it. Okay, we'll go around in through here. I don't want to spend too much time being too fussy with some of the colors. Sometimes I get bogged down and don't have time to finish a painting a lot of times. And the worst is sometimes I'll do trees and I don't have time to put the branches on the tree. So my trees look very unfinished. They look like telegraph poles. Let's put some more green in here. Have to be careful. Like I was saying, I don't want to get too much into green and reds. Okay. Now some of this is going to have leaves, and you can fill some of this in with a sort of a neutral color. And sometimes I leave some of the white in there, kind of as a highlight. You can blend. You can go over the edge a little bit if you want, and it doesn't hurt too much. Let's get some color over in here. I just bought some. Talking about stamps, I just bought some this around noontime. Well, probably in the afternoon. And I got stamps with vegetables on them. All different types of vegetables, carrots and beets and cabbage and all sorts of things. Big emphasis on eating vegetables. There's always been an emphasis, but even more so now. Make sure you're having a lot of healthy foods. There was they were always coming out with articles in the paper, and one of the articles talked about, well, this time of year, if you get, problems, you want to make sure you're eating properly. Make sure you're strong enough. Fight some of all the germs and things going around. Fill that in up there. The background colors can be always darker, usually towards the end. Now, I'm sort of a lot of times very cautious when I'm painting, and I start off sort of light, and they look okay until the paper really dries out, really like, a few more hours and things. And all of a sudden, what I thought was brighter just fades out quite a bit. Let's add some more green into that. A little bit. Now you can mix the colors. Let's say if I wanted to perk up some of this color, I can go over that with some more, maybe yellow or something like that. This one can afford to be darker. Let's see if I can get that a little bit darker in here. I see, I'm always thinking of contrast too. So maybe that could be a darker shade in here. Okay. Something like that. Okay. And you can leave some of the highlight in there if you want some texture. Rather than keeping a color of something just flat, I usually put a shadow on. See how the shadow kind of perks everything up a little bit more. But when you do that a lot of times, you have to kind of, I'm going to lift some of that out. When you do that, you have to repeat that somewhere else, so that it doesn't look like that was just an accident. So you can lift some of the color out too and get that highlight back in there. The highlight gives it a little bit more oomph, a little bit more sparkle. Okay. There's always some little fussy thing that you can fill in, especially around the edges, because I put tape on to make a kind of a false matte. I've been doing that lately, so that when I take the tape off, you can see what it would look like with a matte on it. But you do have to get right to the edge of the tape here, so you don't have a bumpy edge when you pull the tape off. Okay, take a little bit more of that out of there. Lighten it up a bit. Okay. Now, whoops, I got another little leaf up in there. We'll fill that in. Here we go. Your two colors the same, almost the same next to each other. Sometimes when you plan this thing out, what I usually put, a lot of times I'll put in the number, like all the ones and all the color 2s and the color 3s, painting by the numbers, right? Okay, now, add a little bit more to that. Make sure I got all the sides filled in here. Okay, I was talking about the so-called Mayflower. That's the name of the boat, the ship the Pilgrims came over on, and there's no such thing actually as a flower that is called a Mayflower. And I looked it up in the dictionary to make sure my information was somewhat accurate. And the dictionary says that there's no such thing as a flower that's called a Mayflower, but it's a general term for all the flowers that blossom or grow in the month of May. So, having said that, now you get sometimes a big shape like that. You can just wet that. If you want that to be nice and soft in there, like the petal, you can wet that. And I'm going to go right to the edge with that. Right to the edge. And even in the petals, see, I can pull some of that color out and give it a little bit more surface, more interest in the shade of color. Let's put a little bit more blue into this. They don't not every petal has to be the same. They can vary it a little bit more. Now that's painting, right now that's painting wet onto dry, but if I want to get that color pulled around here, I can just wet the paper over here and fill that in. You can kind of pull it out so that you get a variation of shades of color within that. You do that for a lot of things, leaves and petals on flowers, even the sky when you paint the clouds in and so forth. You can vary the different shades of color. Okay, let's do this part here. Again, this is dry, painting wet onto dry. Add a little bit more water on the brush and don't let that color settle in yet too much. Then you can pull some of that color out before it settles into the paper and dries too much. And, now, another thing, if you want to really show a little bit more emphasis, before the paper dries, just take your brush, pinch it out with a paper towel, and just lift some of that color out. See how you can get different shades in there. Okay, let's come across here. Again, you start off dry onto dry paper with a paint, and bring that right around in here. And before that can set up, you can just pull that right out of there before it settles into the paper. Blue is a real stainer. It's very hard to scrub it out once it dries because it just settles right into the paper. There you go. Get that filled in. Now this is quite noticeable over here that I left too much highlight, but that's not a problem. I just, just fill it in, just soften it out. You don't want too much highlight coming through. Okay, come around that way. Now, I'm filling this in quite a bit today because I wanted to dry, give it some time to dry, because I'm going to be outlining and making the contours of the shape a little bit wider, almost like you would do a stained glass window. Whoops, there we go. I think I'm getting a little bit of green into that. Gonna wiggle that around, blot it. Yeah. Okay. Now, this is a fast way to color things in. And the only thing I got to add now, I'm going to make that center. I'm going to try to get some orange here. You gotta remember that this is sort of an imaginary flower. It's just it's a Mayflower and whatnot. I think I got a little bit too much paint on the brush here. Of the wrong color. I wanted to get that more of an orange color. Now in watercolor, if you go outside the line, you can pull that out, pick up some of that color, or you can have that color reflect on the petal. So you can do a little bit of both. See how I can just soften that color into the petal. And usually what I do, if I want anything to be stronger, I can work on that. I'm hoping to get this filled in a little bit more today so I can, I'm not crazy about what's happening in here. I think I'm gonna, that's kind of dark, so I'm gonna pull some of that out. Pull some of the color out of that area. Because I want it to kind of match up in here. I'm always thinking about how to distribute the color. Most paintings, they always repeat the color somewhere else. Like this, the same color over here. Another color I haven't used, it was getting a little bit more purple into this. You get that a little bit more purple too. I haven't used that too much. But see how you can take that color and you can blend it out. But the only trouble is you have to be careful. If you go too much into that, then the petal starts turning greenish. Too much that yellow getting onto the petal. Now you can always come back and solve that problem. You just mix up a stronger shade of blue. And go back into here. Now, that's pretty dark, but let's pull that out before it can settle in. Now I've just got mostly water on the brush, not much color. You just take that blue and just pull that out around here. So that's giving it another coat of paint. Now, if you go over the line, it's not a big problem. But if I've got that dark here, that means I got to repeat that color on all the petals, or at least make an effort to, excuse me, get that color out here. Okay. I don't mind if it's a little bit wet into wet, because a lot of times I like the colors to do kind of do their own thing. So sometimes wet into wet kind of pulls the color back. And I want to bring this all the way out into here more. Same way with this one. There you go. Yeah, something like that. See how I can build this. Excuse me. We can build this whole thing up. You can always go darker. You can always go darker with your color. If I put something there, I repeat it somewhere else. Kind of distribution of color. Excuse me. I talk about that a lot. Distribution of the color. You read all the art magazines, and they hardly ever use that terminology. They might say you repeat the color somewhere, but actually it's a distribution, how you distribute the color throughout the composition. This is giving it another coat. Now some of these areas you can actually, once the paint is dry enough, you can take the marker and you can actually fill some of the areas in, excuse me, with a darker color. It's a solid color. Sometimes I don't like to cut that off. So what I do is just take some water and either pull the orange into the red, or the red, I pull that into the yellow. This is a little bit weak over here. Let's kind of perk that up with a little bit more color. There we go, a little bit darker. See how your distribution of the color. Over here, this gets a little bit too much of the same on all these little shapes, so sometimes you have to make a decision whether you want to just darken the shape out, you know, with a marker or something after it dries. Oh, let's come down here. Okay, so we've got a little bit of time to let some of this dry. And what I'm going to be doing is going over it with, this is getting a little bit too kind of blurry out here. take some of that out of there. Sometimes you just have to clean it up a little bit. Here we go. Okay. Now, with the lights we have, they give off some heat, and they're very helpful as far as getting this to dry faster. I try not to use the hair dryer too much because it's kind of noisy, and people tuning into the program might not care to listen to the noise of the dryer. So, see, what I'm doing here, I try to do the same thing somewhere else on the pedals. Soften it out. This can be kind of cleaned up a bit in there. Move the paint around. And a lot of times, if I have a lot of time, I can spend more time really getting a little bit more textural with the paint itself, showing some of the shadows on the edges. There's going to be shadows that go back up towards the center in here. Over here, there's a little darker shadow around. Even the petals themselves, they can turn out looking a little bit flat. So what you do is just purposely put some darker shadow on them. See, but if you do it to one, then you have to kind of give the other petals a little bit more color. I've kind of hidden the numbers in there. I've got 2 and a 0 and another 2 and 0 for 2020. And over here I got a 14, kind of hidden in there. Just kind of pull some of this color around. I don't have to leave as much highlight in here, leave some lighter areas. I've left this kind of light here, but I can take some of the pinks out of here and reflect it onto the pedal. Okay, give you an idea. Now there is on the Mayflower, the replica of the Mayflower, they have put a nice little emblem on the stern of the boat, on the back of the boat. Made it a little bit more decorative on the Mayflower. They did a good job. They had it all refurbished down at Mystic Seaport. They've got quite a area down there. Nice place to visit. Gives you a little background of the history of that time. Okay, now this gets a little bit solid through here, so I can maybe wet the brush, and I'm going to use another towel. That one's getting a little bit too much paint on it. And you can blot this a little bit to help it dry faster. So, all right. lift some of that out of there. Usually if you got a few little puddles here and there, you can kind of pick them up. You notice if I work one area, I go back and kind of try to touch up a little bit here and there. Now, what I'm trying to do here is kind of let this dry a bit. And I'm kind of helping it along by picking up some of the excess water. You don't want to hit it too hard because sometimes you lift too much paint out and then you have to touch it up, add some of that color back in there. It's a little bit kind of blurry up in here, a little bit smudgy. And like I said, once this dries, you can take probably one of your larger markers, like this shape here. If you want that to show up a little bit more, you can go over that. But you have to just wait until it's a little bit drier. See, you can go over some of these outlines a little bit heavier. Something like that. Touch this up. It's supposed to be the 2 in there. Make it go over that line a little bit more. And you probably want to use a permanent marker because if you want to add some more water into this later on or some more color, the thing is you may want to have a permanent marker so it doesn't blur. Just outline that one a little bit more. You can go back into this and where you want it to be a little bit cleaner cut. You can go back in there and make some of those. If some of the shapes are a little bit bunched together, like I said earlier, you could take some of the shapes and just make them much darker. See how we're doing. Still a little bit moist up in here. We'll use a cleaner towel so that you don't have some paint on it from another color. Now, if this is dry enough in here, I can make this a little bit darker, a little bit thicker. Outline like that. Keep going over that and make it a little bit wider out into here. See how you can make certain areas jump out a little bit more. Yeah, in here. If you go over a line like that with a marker, the only way you can get that marker out of there, you have to let it dry and almost sandpaper it off there. But what I usually do sometimes, I take and just make that wider here, and you just hide that shape. You see how you can, that's quite a bit wider. Make it wide. And then when you get over here, you can either make that wider or you can carry it this way. Bring that out wider in through here. And make sure this is kind of cleaned in pretty good. Bring that up like this. Kind of like coming into here. And you can make that area show up quite a bit. Now, it looks kind of funny if you don't repeat it all the way out here. Make this a little bit wider into here. See, now that's starting to look like more of the stained glass window type of thing. There we go. Yeah, that's getting better. That really cleans it up. It cleans up the edge quite a bit. But like I said, you got to make sure it's dry enough. Otherwise, the mark is not going to show up very well. Yeah, you can keep outlining everything, make it jump out. I'm going to turn the board around a little bit, look at it upside down. And you can see where you want certain things to be more defined. Just go around the contour and make it wider, the outline. We'll fill that in. Make this show up a little bit more. Okay. Now sometimes if you have a shape that doesn't look good, like some little thing in there, what I do sometimes is just fill it in solid. But then if it's supposed to show up as a number, then you have to be careful that you don't distort that too much so that you can't tell where the number was. That's 200, no, 202, then 0. That's a little bit distorted though. You'd have to look hard to see that. Okay. Now, as this dries, you can do more with it. You can fill in some of these little corners here and whatnot. You see that I've done a lot of outlining here, but nothing up there, so now I got to make this look like that. So let's go over, I think these are dry enough, I can, go over the numbers. That's supposed to be 1. This is number 4. If I can get that in there. If it's still a little bit wet, the numbers don't show up as well. And get this to come down into here. Okay, something like that. You can have that 4. You can have that go up into there a little bit more too. And this is supposed to be 142. Here's a 2 in here. Again, you can make that wider. And there's the 0. Go over that a little bit more. Make that show up. Now, it's almost as if we've got to do more with the flower shape itself. You want to outline that a little bit more. Okay, bring that out. If you go too wide, just fill it in. When they do a stained glass window, sometimes they call it, I guess they call it leading it, maybe that, how they make that connect and hold together. That might be the term. Just clean that up a little bit more. I think it's still wet, that's why oh, here we go. Okay. I'm getting a lot filled in down here, but not as much up there. So now, clean this corner up here a little bit more. Okay, now we're going to work on this a little bit more over here. Outline that so it's stronger, separate the color and the shape. A little bit stronger here There you go. There's still a little bit of touch-up work. I'm just cleaning up the edges here a little bit more. Normally, we take a little bit more time to work on it. No matter how many times you work on something, there's always some little touch-up that has to be done. So that's what we're doing with kind of filling this in. Okay. Yes, still some work to do. I started to take the tape off, but you can see when you take the tape off, you can see the edges clean up quite a bit. You get an idea what it would look like with an actual mat on it. So you can get the idea of what the stained glass window would be like once you do a little bit more of the outline. Okay, just fill in some of these areas here. Work around this. Okay, I think I still got a little piece of tape on the corner. Maybe. Oh, a little bit of tape over here. This tape sometimes is pretty good stuff, but sometimes it does stick to your painting. So that gives you an idea where we're at. And sometimes if the mark is going over an area where the paint's still wet, it won't fill in. So you have to come back and do a little bit more of the cleanup work around the edges. Okay, but that will give you an idea. There's 14 kind of hidden in there a little bit too much. 1420, and then you got 2020. 400 years. Quite a bit of time there. And when the Pilgrims came over, of course, there were still other people here before them. And obviously the Indians were here before everybody. And so, but it seems like shortly thereafter, the settlers started coming in rapid numbers. We'll try to make that stand out a little bit more in through here. That gives you an idea of what that looks like. Shows up a little bit more. You can do extra, like I said, you could show extra little lines in there. Maybe, some of the veins in the leaf. You could add a little texture on the petal itself. Depends on how much time you want to spend with the fussy stuff. So, but this just gives you an idea what you could do with this. You can make kind of little designs like a placemat, that you could use on the table. Make one picture and then have some copies made. You probably wouldn't want to make a placemat for every station or every area that you're going to have that many people, Everybody's cutting back on the number of people this year. There you go. Now, like I said, if you want to add some texture in here, you can put some dots. I think they'd have to be a little bit more noticeable. Fill in around here. It gives you an idea what it might look like. So there you go. So I think we've run out of time, but I'm not sure. But if we have brushes up, and we'll see you next session. We'll be probably by then we'll be pretty close to December. We'll have to do a winter scene or something.